Let's talk now to Middle East analyst Sigurd Neubauer, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Sigurd, thank you very much indeed. So Martin Griffiths seems to be making some headway insofar as he's having meetings with all the right people. What's your assessment of how this Yemen deal, which is specifically applicable to Hodeidah in the first instance, what's your assessment of how it's working?
Thank you very much for having me on. Let me just begin by saying that it's very positive that positive statements are coming out of both Riyadh and Sana'a before he is going to brief the UN Security Council tomorrow in New York. So the fact that the process is continuing and the fact that we're even discussing the prospects of a second round of peace talks underscores that the political will that is necessary to advance any peace talks between the parties is still there, and that the U.S. diplomatic pressure on Riyadh and Abu Dhabi is firm, because we know that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be in the region this week, and he will be discussing specifically the peace process once he visits Abu Dhabi and Riyadh.
Right. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, this is a deal. The deal that was struck in Sweden was specifically quite narrow in terms of its terms of reference. It was applicable to the port of Hodeidah in order to allow for these vitally needed humanitarian supplies to get into the country and prevent the starvation of millions of people. Is that actually happening? Is aid coming in, and are the people of Yemen being supplied finally?
The aid has been coming in through Yemen throughout the war from Hodeidah. The problem is that it is not enough. You can't just have one entry point of humanitarian supplies into a country of tens of millions of people. So that to ensure that transition continues is obviously vital. I think what is important to understand is that the deal over Hodeidah was a test, if you will, for the parties to see if they can agree on this. They might be able to agree on other issues that are more complex and difficult, including potential power sharing arrangements and so forth. So I think that the political talks will be the next phase of these talks. But for now, the fact that there are UN monitors on the ground in Hodeidah to ensure that the ceasefire is holding is in itself a success.
And do you feel then that, given the limited success, I suppose is the word we could use, with regard to the Sweden deal, do you think that that is presenting the building blocks upon which a greater, more comprehensive deal can be reached?
Potentially, yes. And so far, we're seeing that the mechanics are working, because if we are to see, for instance, later this month, a second round of peace talks, not in Sweden, but in Kuwait, which is in the region. And Kuwait has already a history of engaging in Yemen peace talks, whether it was helping to broker the 2011 GCC agreement that helped transition then President Ali Abdullah Saleh away from power, or if it was in 2015 to shepherd through the first sets of talks, peace talks that at the time did not succeed. The fact that Kuwait is now on the agenda again, or I should say potentially on the agenda again, shows that the ownership for the peace process needs to be in the region, and that the international community will close circle around the UN peace process and to push forward. So I think that all the positive signs are there. Whether or not there will be last-minute spoilers, we don't quite know as of yet.
All right, Sigurd Neubauer, thank you very much indeed for that. Sigurd talking to us live there from Washington, D.C.